Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. I am just finishing setting up the other element of the live stream. Within the next minute or so, we'll be good to start. Please bear with me for one moment while I make sure we're also live on TikTok as well. We're streaming at the moment across LinkedIn, across YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. So yeah, previously it was a case where we would only stream, or I would only stream on LinkedIn. But over time, the platform has kind of extended and expanded across various social media applications. So now we're streaming to all of them. So look, everyone who's taken the time out of their day to join this, thank you very much. Over the next 90 minutes, I'll be giving you as much value as I possibly can to essentially aim in supporting you in landing your next position in the UAE or KSA. Um, Before I dive into anything, I do want to just briefly mention one moment. Let me just make sure that everyone is able to hear me and see me. Just a quick one as well, guys. If everyone can confirm in the chat that you're able to hear me before I start off, just to make sure that I'm not sitting here speak to myself. If you can confirm on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, would really appreciate if someone could just pop their hand up and let me know that you can hear me, you can see me before I start kicking off. Amazing. Thank you so much on TikTok, YouTube. Perfect. Amazing. Have we got Instagram? Yes, we do. Cheers, guys. Really appreciate it. Okay, perfect. We are good to go. So, look, the first thing that I do want to say is that in terms of the types of questions that I'll be taking from you guys, please do keep in mind that there's a relatively broad array of people who will be watching this session. You're going to have some people who are perhaps relatively junior, early days in their careers, and then you're going to have some people who are very far along and are at what would be considered sort of end game of their careers, sort of C-suite and execs. And this particular session isn't solely geared towards any one group of individuals, whether that be, your industry, whether it be your seniority, whether it be the types of roles that you're looking for. These sessions aren't specifically geared towards any one group of individuals. These sessions are geared towards the job search process. And surprisingly, although there will be variation, surprisingly, a lot of actions that would be taken by someone who's junior would also relate to someone who is very senior. So there will be huge crossover, although not every single question that's asked and that I answer will be hyper relevant to every single person. There will be a huge amount of value that you'll be able to receive from other people's questions as well as your own. So one thing I do ask is that we don't get into hyper specifics of your job. With your questions, please do make them relating to the job search itself. So if you're looking for something in your career, you're applying for jobs, you're struggling to land interviews, you're applying, but you're getting rejected, these are the types of questions that I will be answering. One thing as well before we kick off, is sort of like the elephant in the room, if you will, in relation to everything that's going on in the world at the moment. The UAE is obviously pretty impacted by everything that's happening. And I know there will be questions that we all have pertaining to what's actually going on in the UAE. For those of you who are here, you'll have a better idea of what's going on the ground. But for those of you who are applying from abroad, applying from your home country or wherever you might be and looking for jobs over in the UAE or Saudi, you will obviously have questions about like what's actually going on, like how stable are things at the moment, and these kinds of questions will be there. And I'll be happy to take these questions and provide sort of clarity on the situation for anything that I don't cover now. But yeah, we do want to keep it sort of job search related as much as possible. But in terms of the perspective that we have from what we're seeing from our business is getting people jobs, right? That is what we do. So what we see is a direct reflection of what is actually happening on the market. And frankly speaking, we have been seeing ups and downs. So we've been seeing a lot more spikes in hiring and then a lot more sort of lows and dips than usual. Don't get me wrong. This is a very dynamic market. The GCC is extremely dynamic. People are coming and going all the time, irrespective of sort of, the geopolitical situations at the time. But the GCC is a very dynamic market. People come and go. That's kind of increased more, where there's big spikes in people looking for jobs and then it dips off, and then there's big spikes and then it dips off. We've been seeing that quite a bit. So I'd suggest that, look, ultimately, things are relatively stable, relatively speaking. Companies are still hiring. Today is quite a big day in terms of, and this is quite specifically why we've scheduled this live session today, because of what we heard sort of through the grapevine, that children were going back to school today. So in the UAE, kids going back to school, whether you have kids or not, whether you're in the country or not, is a huge thing for everyone, because HR teams who have kids are working from home. Everyone who has kids is kind of working from home or back and forward and not really working efficiently. So now that everyone is back in office for the most part, and things are really returning to what we'd consider to be normality to a wide degree, hiring is going to increase now, today. There has been a loss in productivity since Q2 started. So there has been a bit of a dip off in hiring. Not hugely, but there has been a dip off, and organizations, or we're expecting organizations, to be attempting to make up for that loss in productivity now. So that's related to that. Now, in terms of a couple of things that I wanted to mention before I started taking questions, because there are two really pressing issues that I wanted to discuss and just clarify, just for 5 or 10 minutes before I start opening up the floor for questions, because of how problematic and impactful these two things are when it comes down to securing a job in the UAE or KSA. These two particular things, and they are both sort of branches of the same tree, or birds of the same feather. But genuinely, I used to say that one of the biggest problems was low quality outreach, sort of like spelling mistakes or lack of care when it comes down to preparing your CV and stuff like this. This was a huge problem. But now we're seeing a larger issue at play that's really making highly reputable, high quality professionals struggle to land jobs in the region. And it's AI. So AI, from my perspective, is one of the largest problems at play when it comes down to the job market right now. So AI is causing more professionals to struggle and lose out on opportunities than making spelling mistakes, than rubbish CVs, than anything like this ever has. AI has roboticized the hiring process, and that's what's made it so difficult for you guys to secure interviews and secure jobs. But now we're also having a similar problem where it's sort of automated the job search process. So people are relying on AI to apply for jobs. People are using AI to write their CVs. They're using AI to write their outreach messages. These are typically things where you'd be able to shine, or your character or your personality would be able to come into play and sort of win over processes for you. But now we're seeing such heavy reliance on AI, to the point where most of the messages I get on social media are created with AI. Most of the LinkedIn messages I get, thinking that I can help you get a job, you're sending me an AI message. Most of the messages that are being sent to hiring managers and recruiters are sent and created by AI. And even to the extent where people are literally writing their entire CV with AI and thinking that that's going to be enough to get you a job in one of the most competitive job markets in the world. And frankly speaking, it will not. It simply won't. The extent of AI usage now, although I understand why you may feel as it's a good option to use and that it does make sense for you to start utilizing AI to start securing interviews, you are likely to be very wrong. And the chances of you actually landing interviews whilst utilizing AI for your search, other than for research purposes and stuff like that, which is fine, but attempting to try and automate your job search, you will be on the job market for a very long time. And there are people who have been applying for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months with barely any interviews and, of course, no offers. And a huge reason behind that is this reliance on AI, which is a huge, huge issue. So that's the first point, reliance on AI. The second point is also similar to AI, but it's a little bit different. It's sort of like an offshoot, if you will. But there's a huge phenomenon at the moment where there's auto apply. People are using these automated tools to apply for jobs. Some of you guys might have seen them. Interesting to see how many of you are familiar with these. If you can let me know whether you've used them, whether you've heard of them, or whatever that might be. But the issue with these is that so many people are having their CVs just fired out in random to as many people as they can possibly get their hands on, or just applying for every single opportunity that they can apply for. And ultimately, this is kind of like the spray and pray approach. You're so unlikely to get anything fruitful back. And, some of the more senior people in this live may think, well, yeah, of course, that's going to be people who are less experienced that are doing this. But you'd be wrong. There are CXOs, right? People who are on 100,000 AD a month, 200,000 AD a month, if not more, who have their CV or their profile sitting in this sort of automated system that essentially just fires it out to tens of thousands of random emails. That is not how people are going to hire someone, right? That's not how people don't see these emails come in and think, oh, great, another one of these 500 emails that I've received. That's exactly what I was looking for, right? That's not really how it goes, as I'm sure most of you will be aware. But it is a huge problem that we're seeing at the moment. So the two things that you need to stay away from are trying to automate your job search, right? You automate your messages, automate your outreach, automate your emails, automate your applications, and then these mass send out tools or mass apply tools where you just put your profile in and it just sends it everywhere. These things will not lead to results in a competitive market like this. With that said, guys, I'm going to open up the floor for questions and start answering any questions that have been put forward now. So again, for anyone who's just joined, please do post any questions in the chat relating to your job search in the region, and I will go through and I'll answer all of these questions. And one thing I will do as well, and I can kind of make a promise to you guys on this front, is that I won't give you answers that sound nice to hear. I do see in sessions like this, we find sometimes that the answers are kind of, positive, but not positive in the right way. Sort of like toxic positivity, right? You can do it. Yeah, go on. Like that kind of approach, right? I won't give you that. I'll give you the sort of blunt truth of the matter and exactly what you need to do in order to push through. So yeah, there won't be any kind of, apologies. There won't be any kind of, filling it full with nice to hears. So yeah, let's dive into the questions. So, are organizations becoming more cautious with international hiring given global uncertainties? What I'm also going to do here is I'm going to pop the questions on the screen. I won't do it for this one just because perhaps, this particular individual wouldn't want that to be the case. But any questions that are asked, I will put them on the screen and you'll see your profile on there. So if you don't want me to put your question on the screen, just put brackets at the end and say, please don't put it on the screen. So the first question, are organizations becoming more cautious with international hiring given global uncertainties? It's a... Yes, they are, right? It is a difficult question to ask or a difficult question to answer. And the reason it's a difficult question to answer is because all organizations are different, right? All organizations are different. I've spoken with a few founders of recruitment companies over here, for example, and some of them are pretty aggressively hiring, more aggressively than they were before. And then others have completely froze hiring and aren't moving a muscle until things return back to normal. And then you'll also have some who are mass laying off people in their organizations, right? So there are going to be so many different factors when it comes down to what are organizations actually doing. Is there a one particular trend that organizations are going down? Not really. Not really, because every organization has a different sort of disaster or a different level of readiness for a disaster like what occurred. Some organizations will sink, some organizations will float, and some organizations may actually flourish when certain situations occur. So ultimately, there is no one shoe fits all. Are we seeing hiring take place? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Are we seeing more caution when it comes down to like bringing people over from other countries? So hiring from abroad? Perhaps, yes, there may be a little bit more caution from some organizations, but we have still seen tons of offers being released, both locally and to talent who are applying internationally. That said, one thing that we have been seeing somewhat frequently, not for the majority, but for a percentage to international applicants, is more open-ended job offers. So where job offers are being released, but the company isn't saying, okay, you've got a start date of the 1st of May. More so, they're saying, okay, yes, we're going to make you an offer, but we don't have a exact start date for you now, and they might provide a tentative start date. So that is something that we're seeing. And of course, it's understandable, right? What is today could not be tomorrow, right? Tomorrow things might change drastically. Things might go completely back to normal tomorrow. Things might calm down entirely. Everything might settle tomorrow, or things might kick up a little bit tomorrow, right? That is a possibility. So organizations do have a little bit of trepidation when it comes down to moving forward on hires, but they are still happening, right? They are still happening. We're reviewing offers every single day, Monday through Monday, right? Every single day we are getting dozens of offers being sent across to us for us to review. So there are still tons of offers being released. Of course, it may just mean that there are other roadblocks that you may not have faced before, i.e. delays and stuff like that. But yeah, it's still very possible to secure a job in the region from abroad. Which are the industries that are still hiring and which are the ones that have slowed down? So some industries in particular have slowed down, right? It would be foolish for us to say that, all industries are affected the same way and everyone's fine, right? Some industries have been hit harder than others since everything began, since the conflict started. One organization or one space, it's almost like a conglomerate of industries, if you will, would be anything that is heavily reliant on tourism. Anything that is heavily reliant on tourism. And that doesn't mean that all sort of hospitality institutes are affected, because some are not heavily leveraged on tourism. They're heavily leveraged on local tourism, perhaps, or they're heavily leveraged on the local population, right? There are certain restaurants that are doing pretty well at the moment, or very well. But then there are other restaurants who are struggling greatly, to the point where 90% of the workforce has perhaps been laid off, or they've seen reductions in pay and stuff like this, right? So there have been effects, and the effects are different across industries, but there is not one specific there's not one specific rule or one specific industry that's doing exceptionally well and one that is sort of flat out bad to apply for right now. It is more so dependent on what they are reliant on, where their revenue stream comes from. Let's see what we've got here. How is the situation of jobs post-war? So yeah, again, like the situation of jobs post-war is that hiring still being made. Of course, there's more trepidation, but there is still a very strong flow of interviews taking place, offers being released, and people starting new positions in the region, which is fantastic. So someone has posted here and they have mentioned that my Dubai job search has only just started and my problem is finding suitable jobs to apply for in the first place. So that is understandable, right? Especially when you're perhaps targeting more senior positions. So once you're targeting roles that are perhaps director level and above, once you're targeting roles that are paying anything north of perhaps 40,000 AED a month. There is, of course, going to be a level of decrease in the positions that are being listed. The more easily findable or the more easily fillable a position is, the easier it's going to be to find these positions and apply for them, because obviously there's tons of them, right? But the more senior you get, an organization tends to operate on like a bit of a pyramid structure. So where the higher you get to the top, the less positions there are. The lower you go down to the bottom, the more positions there are. That said, a large percentage of positions, especially at anything above manager grade in the GCC, this does apply to the rest of the world as well, but it's hyper concentrated in the GCC. A large percentage of positions here are filled via headhunting or what is referred to as the hidden job market, right? The hidden job market is essentially LinkedIn Recruiter. It's nothing exciting. It's not like a group that you need to join or anything like that. It's not that. It is just recruiters utilizing a platform, which is LinkedIn Recruiter, to access directly exactly who they want based on the data that they have on their LinkedIn profile. Very simple, very straightforward, but it is the number one tool that recruiters and talent acquisition teams and exec search teams, whatever it might be, will utilize to source talent in the region. That is where a large portion of the roles, perhaps that you're not finding online, will be residing. They're not listed, they're being headhunted or sourced directly. That said, unless you're working in a mega niche space, right? For example, I had someone reach out. They were a specialist in something like space traversal or something like this. We couldn't help them because like it's not a space that we work in, and we're not very familiar with it. But nonetheless, perhaps that you're not going to find loads of these jobs listed. But if you're working in a space like finance director or sales director, operations director, you're working with an airline, you're working with banks, you're working with organizations like this, sort of everyday, relatively common positions or organizations, you should be able to find these roles online. And if you are struggling, it may just mean that you're perhaps looking in the wrong places. It very well may be that there is a lack of these positions, but from, without having a look at it, it's likely that you're perhaps looking in the wrong places. Let's see. Right. So a question here. So how do you apply? So this is on the back of the message that I put out first, right? The message that I put out first was AI making it more difficult for you to land a job in the region, using AI to write your CV, using AI to write your messages and whatnot. But Sophia has said, so how should you apply? Because she heard that AI will help her to get shortlisted. Now, it will not. Now, it might say that, but it won't, right? The same way if you asked AI to write you a book that's going to sell 1 million copies, it may say, okay, yes, on paper, this is going to sell 1 million copies, but it probably won't, right? It probably won't, no matter how good you prompt it. Now, in terms of AI helping to shortlist your CV, most companies will use something called an ATS. Most of you will be very familiar with what an ATS actually is. It essentially manages the hiring process, looks at your CVs, and will then rank or grade your CV and then push it forward or reject it. Now, these systems that these recruiters and hiring teams are using are integrated with AI. And one of the first things that these systems will look for is AI usage to reject you. So if you're using AI to apply, you will face rejection. Okay. So, or you're very likely to face rejection. Of course, you're not guaranteed to, but it's very likely you will face rejection. So no matter what you've heard, it will not, right? Even if you are really good with AI, you're playing a very risky game. You're playing a very risky game because you're banking on this system not being able to anticipate or identify that you're using AI. So be very, very careful with that. Someone said, has anyone had a single response for a job advert on LinkedIn? I don't think that's a question for me, but look, people, of course, have people do get jobs on LinkedIn. There's no way a platform would grow to this size of billions of users, or I think it was 1 point something billion users, and just interviews don't take place. They definitely do. And also, one thing that you can do is you can actually go onto people's LinkedIn profiles and it will say, LinkedIn helped me get this job. So you can look through their experience history and it will say, right, LinkedIn helped me get this job, and they'll put that there, right? So let's see. So someone said here, for the GCC, should one create a CV highlighting a project in a storyline format or bullet pointers? So when you do your CV, let's say, for example, there we go. Someone's just said on TikTok, I've had offers from Easy Apply. I think it's pure luck and timing / how your CV is. So someone has mentioned that on TikTok, that they have had interviews through that. And I imagine a bunch of you guys have as well. It would be good actually to see in the comments here, how many of you guys have actually landed interviews through LinkedIn Easy Apply or LinkedIn Normal Apply. It'd be good to see on TikTok and in LinkedIn, Instagram, what sort of responses you guys have seen on that. So yeah, in terms of writing a project or writing an experience, you should be using bullet points. You should not be writing this as a paragraph, as the vast majority of systems will not be able to read this. It is very important that you write your experience or your projects with bullet points. Let me see. Interesting question here. So for anyone who's been watching me for a while, sorry guys, on TikTok, I'm getting a lot of people on TikTok asking, am I answering questions on TikTok as well? Yes, I am. But there are 3 platforms streaming right here, and then I'm speaking to you guys just here on TikTok. So there's going to be more answered here than on TikTok, because naturally I've got loads in front of me, right, from 3 different platforms. So I will be answering questions from TikTok as well. So someone said that, yeah, given that almost everyone in the region is trying to apply through referrals, how does one stand out now that even referrals are common? So the first part of the statement I've got an issue with, because it's not true. Given that almost everyone in the region is trying to apply through referrals. Now, whilst anecdotally from people perhaps that you've been speaking to, this may be true, right? Perhaps if you've been in the region for 15, 20 years, you've got an amazing network. You've got other people, or loads of friends in the same space. Perhaps you're part of a community or something like this. I don't know. And you tend to refer each other and stuff. And then maybe, yeah, perhaps the referrals are in your circle a very common thing. But referrals make up a very small portion of hires that are actually made in the region. Referrals do not overtake organic talent sourcing. Organic talent sourcing makes up for the vast majority of hires that are made, irrespective of what you may have perceived or may anecdotally be true. And for example, like, it's very rare for recruiters, like I'm talking agency recruiters, like your Hayes and stuff like this. It's very rare for them to actually use referrals, like talent referrals, because it's more hassle than it's actually worth a lot of the time. People refer people that they like, not people who are a perfect fit for a job. So they'll get referred people, they'll take the time to look into their profile and whatnot. Turns out they're not actually right, when they could just go and source the right person directly instead of getting a referral. A referral in a market like this isn't as important as a lot of people make it out to be. I do speak to people every single day who mention, well, unless I've got referrals, then it's impossible, right? You need referrals to get a job here. And getting a job without referrals is extremely difficult or borderline impossible, right? Now, it would be naive to say that referrals don't help. If you have referrals, absolutely use them. Absolutely use them. Why not? Why not? Anything at your disposal, try your best and wring the rag and utilize everything you can. But really speaking here, they're not necessary. They're not essential. They are a nice to have. They're a little bonus, a little cherry on top, a little add-on. They are very far from being a necessity, and the quantity of people using them really isn't as large as you may assume. Now, the way that you stand out, if you don't have referrals, or even if you do, how can you stand out on the job market and essentially position yourself as someone who is better than everyone else? Because you are competing, right? When you're applying for a job, you're selling yourself to a company and saying, I'm better than everyone else. Don't bother with them. Speak to me. That's essentially what you're doing, right? You're trying to sell yourself as the obvious choice. And one of the things you can do to enable that, and believe it or not, it isn't as hard as you might think, because the bar at the moment is set so low with the issue that I mentioned at the start. Everyone is using AI, right? Everyone's using AI. So all you need to do is not use AI, be human, show yourself as a solution to a problem, position yourself in a way that's effective for the ATS, and keep running at it, right? Be persistent with it. Of course, that is simplifying it massively. It's simplifying it. And of course, there are steps and processes and actions and implementations that need to be in place. But most people are doing this job search process so wrong that it makes it so difficult to land a position. And instead of taking a step back and thinking, you know what, let me stop doing this, let me really assess this and go with a different approach, perhaps an approach that's more difficult, right? Because sending out 1,000 AI messages is easy. It's very easy, right? You can just put out huge volume of crap and just hope that something comes back when it won't. But instead of that, you could step back and think, right, which 20 companies do I want to work for? Who are the 20 organizations that I could add huge value to and that I'm genuinely excited about working for? Who do I need to speak to within these organizations? Who has the power to push this process forward? Who is a potential gatekeeper for this process? What do I need to do in order to warrant them speaking to me? What would interest them? What would solve a problem for them? That's the kind of stuff you need to be looking at, because that's what no one else is looking at. Everyone else is looking at, right, how many times can I click the apply button? How many, right, I've applied to 500 jobs over the last 6 days. Oh, something's going to come back, right? If you're looking at the volume approach and just sending out as much junk as you can, sending out as much junk messages as you can and hoping something comes back, you'll be disappointed. It's the high quality human interaction that's really missing in this part of the world that will further the process, of course, with competitiveness and compliance in consideration as well. So let's see if we've got a little TikTok question here now. So let's see what we've got. Someone's mentioned that there are a bunch of cuts. Yeah, there have been a lot of like salary cuts and stuff like this recently, unfortunately, which is a big shame. A question here. When asked, what is your notice period? Is it correct to respond with 10 to 15 days? So the question is, when you're asked, what is your notice period? Should you respond with 10 to 15 days? So 9 times out of 10, you should respond with the truth, right? 9 times out of 10. The only time you should perhaps be a little bit more selective with how you word the truth is if your notice period is 3 months or longer. Anything less than 2 months, you should just be completely honest. And 2 months or less, be completely honest. If you've got a 3-month notice, can be a little bit of a pain in the neck. For any of you who are working with sort of large MNCs at a manager grade position or even like a consultant level position, you may have these sort of lengthy notice periods. If you're like a CXO or you're an exec or you've got 20 years of experience and you're very senior with a 3-month notice period, you won't really have to cover this up because it's standard. But if you're sort of mid-level in your career, it can be challenging to push past the 3-month notice because a lot of the companies will want you to join sooner. What you want to do in a situation like this is frame it as if your notice period officially is 3 months, but you're going to be able to get out sooner. So you're expected to be out within 6 weeks, for example. Should you need to delay that? fine, cross that bridge when you come to it. They're already 6 weeks in. They're not going to pull you from process. But if straight away, as soon as they ask you, and in the initial HR screening call, what's your notice period? Oh, it's 3 months. It's 12 weeks. It's a pretty long time, right? It's a pretty long time. If they think, you know what, let's just cut our losses and get them out now, then it could be a problem. Like, you may get removed from process. The later you go and then they find out, okay, the notice period is actually a bit longer, they're already invested in you. They're very unlikely to pull you out of process for it. So you want to position it as, look, I should be able to get out in 6 weeks. Although the official is a little bit longer, you should be able to get out in 6 weeks or something to that tune, right? The concept is there. It's up to you as to how you want to frame it. And you obviously do want to try and enable that. You don't want to just lie. You want to make sure that you do everything you can to get out earlier. But the 3 month can be a bit of a pain in the neck. It's not a complete blocker, but it could cause you to lose out on some opportunities. And preferably, I'd rather you lose out on none. So someone's asked here, what exact tools can be used for the job search? So contrary to my statement previously, you can use AI, right? Bear with me for a second while I explain. Don't just take that snippet and run with it. You can use AI. You can use any form of AI, ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, whatever you want to use. You can use this for research purposes, right? You can use this for research purposes. You can use this to identify companies that you'd want to target, perhaps prompt it with your, what it is that you do, what companies you've worked for, what sort of skill sets you have, and then kind of get a list of organizations that you should target. So that is an option. That is an option. And you can use it for other things as well. But it should only be used for the research phase. It should not be used for any form of action whatsoever. If you're using it for action and you're trying to run your job search with AI, that's when it will go down the toilet. Now, in terms of tools that you can use, number one, you should be using our job search tracker. This is a very simple tool, right? It's a very simple tool, but it will enable you to essentially track every single application that you've sent, every single person that you should be reaching out to, every single interview that you've received, every single rejection that you've received. You should be using this because it allows you to then gather the necessary data to identify where you're going wrong. The worst thing you want to do with your job search is just keep on applying, not land interviews, and then think, 6 months has gone by now. I wonder what's actually breaking down, but you've got no data to look at. With the tracker, if you're applying every day and you're putting in your efforts every single day, within a week or two, you should be able to identify what's actually going wrong or what's holding you back, what's stopping you. So you should be using that. It's completely free for everyone to use. And you can get it in the job search care package. For anyone who doesn't have the job search care package yet, you're welcome to message me on any platform and I'll send it across to you. If you're on YouTube and you're watching this, then message me on one of my socials and I'll send it across to you for free. But you should be using the job search tracker. And you should be using that religiously. There should not be a case where you're just using it from time to time and then, you don't bother with other things. You need to use this effectively for everything. Otherwise, it's not going to be as useful as it should be. You also have a bunch of free resources online. So when it comes down to actually creating your profile and curating it in a way that's actually going to work, because semantics are very important over here, I have a bunch of free tools and a bunch of free resources on the care package that you should use and you should read. I monitor this and I noticed that there are certain resources on there that kind of get overlooked, and they are all exceptionally useful, and utilizing them will help you land a job. So I'd strongly suggest if you have the care package, read every single resource in there, watch everything in there, and use it all because it's all in there for a very good reason. I also have a bunch of videos on my LinkedIn page. If you go over to the events section afterwards, you can see a bunch of videos that I've done on there, landing a job in 90 days, the biggest or the most common mistake that people make when they're looking for a job in the UAE or KSA. There are a bunch of videos on there that are going to be extremely useful for you to use. I also post every day. So essentially, if you were to utilize all of that, you would have everything that you need to secure a job. So yeah, I'd suggest utilizing those tools. Let's see what we've got here. Again, this is another issue, right? So some of you would have heard the term WASTA before, which WASTA, it's essentially referrals, right? That's what it means, or being known or having someone to push your profile. Given that the market is driven by WASTA, it's not driven by WASTA. How can one get a referral? if contacts are frustrated by the volume of outreach. So how can you get someone to refer you? The best answer to this is you probably can't. People aren't going to refer you. They don't know you. And if they do refer you, it's pretty irresponsible on their part because they're just referring a stranger. Their word means nothing, right? They're just referring someone, a random stranger who they don't know, and saying, hey, look, yeah, I put my name behind this person. Doesn't make much sense why they would do that. Plus, you're asking a stranger for a favor with nothing in return. I'm not saying you should offer them something in return either. People refer people, or people should be referring people that they believe are excellent at their job from working with them or whatever it might be. They shouldn't be referring people because they've randomly messaged them on LinkedIn with a copy and pasted message and said to them, hey, would you mind referring me? So I would suggest not going out and seeking referrals because it probably will not work. So don't go out and seek referrals. Instead, what you can do is you can offer value to people. So you can reach out to people and say, hey, look, I've seen that you're hiring for this position. I know someone who's really good for it. I know someone who's great. They're an excellent profile. Would it help you at all if I sent that profile across? If they have two brain cells to rub together, they might look at your profile and think, that person's actually really good. No one else has messaged me asking, would you like me to do a favor for you? No one messages asking that. So perhaps they'll look at you and think, wow, that person's switched on. Let me look at their profile. And if not, fine, whatever. But you've done something that's completely different. You've kind of shaken the pot a little bit and you've stirred things up to the point where you will stand out. Next question. What's a reliable portal to apply on, or the best way to apply for jobs? So there are 3 methods that I'll put forward for you. Number 1, applying directly via the company's ATS. This is the number 1 way to apply for positions in the region. This is what companies use. This is what their hiring teams are KPI'd on. And this is essentially what manages their entire internal hiring process. So applying directly on the company's portal is the most effective way. I'd also recommend applying on our portal, the professionalpyramid.com portal. We list verified positions on there from organizations that we know to be genuinely hiring. There's not hundreds of thousands of positions, because there aren't hundreds of thousands of roles to verify. So these are verified positions that are actually hiring, that if you apply to them, you have a very, very good chance of securing an interview. I'd suggest using that. I'd also suggest utilizing LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an amazing platform to apply. Although the response rates on easy apply applications will be relatively low, there will be, you can put out a large volume of them. You can put out a good bulk volume of them, which will eventually, if you have an optimized profile and you're putting in activity on your LinkedIn profile, the right activity, it will eventually lead to interviews. So that is, they're the platforms I would recommend. Let's see what we've got here. My gosh, there's actually a lot of questions related to referrals. And although I knew how much of a big deal most people held referrals to be in or to be at, I didn't expect there'll be this much reliance on them, or so many questions about referrals. And it's not a problem at all. I'm more than happy to answer. I won't answer questions that have been asked twice, but it is concerning to see how sort of prominent the idea that referrals are essential to landing interviews. I know where the idea comes from, and I'll share that with you guys for anyone who's unaware. The idea that referrals are so important comes from people who look for a job, can't land a job, and then blame not having referrals as a reason why they didn't land a job. Because it's easier and more satisfying to blame an external factor as to why you didn't land a job than say, it was because I was not really bothering. I was just sending out AI messages. I made my CV with AI. I just applying to anything, and I didn't track anything. It's easier to apply and then just say, because of job market, you know what it's like over there. The market's too saturated. I didn't have referrals. I didn't speak Arabic. I didn't have Wasta. These are the types of kind of, this is what leads to this ideology getting pushed that it's all about referrals, when it really isn't. It really isn't. So yeah, I won't answer too many questions about referrals just because I don't want to kind of spin in a circle on it. Um, what companies are currently recruiting now? Like tons of them. A good way to ascertain which companies are recruiting now and genuinely recruiting will be on our portal. That will be one of the best ways to ascertain who is genuinely hiring now. You can search by date. What should the score? What should the score of your resume be to get noticed while the ATS drill was done by the recruiters? Right. So there is no such thing as an ATS score. The ATS score is like going up to someone and saying, right, how handsome am I on a scale of 1 to 10? And someone tells you 10 and then another person says, oh, 2, right? There is no such thing as an ATS score because there are dozens of different systems that are used in the region and across the world. They can't measure against all of these systems. We're working on something, and we've been working on something for a very long time that will help with this, but there is no such thing as an ATS score. So if you've got 100 ATS score or 1,000, whatever they're scoring it out of 999, it could be non-compliant with every tool in the region. There is no such thing as an ATS score. If you want me to look at your CV and tell you if it's ATS compliant and test it against some of the systems that we have, I'm more than happy to do so for you. But there is no such like pop it in and it's going to give you a score back. There's no such thing at the moment. Oh, this is an interesting question. Will there be any downward adjustments to the compensation bands for senior roles? So currently, yes, there has been. Not in relation to like offers going out, but people who are working, people who are employed already. Some people in certain industries, especially like hotels and stuff like this, or certain F&B brands and whatnot, people have seen temporary cutbacks to their pay. A lot of the time, these are voluntary. A lot of I've spoken to a lot of senior, very, very senior sort of C-suite professionals or senior directors, execs within organizations who have taken either voluntary pay cuts, like 50%, 60%, 70% pay cuts, or entirely forfeited their salaries for 1 month, 2 months, whatever, in order to mitigate any damage or any financial strain on those who are more junior, which is absolutely admirable. I can't name these individuals who have done this or which companies they're working for, but there are tens of people that I've spoken to who have drawn their salary back voluntarily to avoid any financial strain on more junior individuals within their organization. So, you know, it's really nice to see that people are willing to do that. But in terms of long term, i.e., when things calm down, everything goes back to normal and hiring resumes as normal, will we see like a pushback in salaries being offered? I wouldn't imagine so. No, I wouldn't imagine so. Of course, there's no way for us to be certain until we get there. We can all speculate and we can go off what we've seen previously, but there hasn't been a situation like this previously. We've had big issues like COVID and stuff like that, but we've not had a situation like this. So I would speculate no, compensation won't go back. And in fact, I anticipate in certain positions, it may actually go up. It may actually increase because the amount of investment that's going to go in to the UAE and to KSA after things do settle down in order to bring back public perception of the region. Although from most people here still deem it to be unbelievably safe and an amazing place to live, there's going to be investment, and there already is investment in order to revitalize and kind of mitigate any harm that's been done. So I'd anticipate it potentially going up for a short period and then going back to kind of how it was, and just with the incremental increases throughout the years. Let's see what we've got. Let's see what we've got here. Right. Some of the questions are a little bit tricky. Someone's asked again, like, what tools should be used to assess their CV's compliance with an ATS? Look, send it across to me. I'll have a quick look at it, and I'll be happy to kind of advise on it. Here we go. I like this. What percentage of hiring is done through portals compared to references? So I did mention that references make up a small part. It is difficult to tell. It is difficult to tell exactly what percentage of hires come through referrals and what percentages of hires come through portals or other means of hiring. A large percentage of hires come through LinkedIn Recruiter, sort of direct headhunting and sourcing, anything manager grade and above. A large portion will come from there. And a large portion will come through job portals as well. So one thing I will say is that references make up a minority of hiring. They make up a minority. Although if you were to Google it right now, it might tell you, oh, it's 70%, right? That's because it's scraping some data from a website or something like that, but it's not. It's not 70% through referrals. It most certainly is not. Referrals probably make up closer to perhaps 5 to 10% of hires that are being made in the region. And I would take a guess that it would probably be even less than that. So the vast majority of hires are made through job portals, are made through direct headhunting, and are made through these means. Let's see what we've got. Nice. It's a good question, this. This is a really good question. I'm going to take a couple more on TikTok shortly after as well. So I've been here in Dubai for the past 8 months, and I've been searching and applying to multiple jobs, but I've had no response from the companies or the recruiters. You say that we should get connected with companies like Hayes, Michael Page, etc., but how do we connect with them when nobody responds? So most recruiters, unfortunately, will not respond to your messages, right? Most recruiters will not respond. But that doesn't mean that your message has gone completely under the bus. Although a recruiter might not respond to your message when you reach out to them on LinkedIn or whatever it might be, the fact that you've reached out to them and you've contacted them, you've connected with them, LinkedIn will log this data. LinkedIn logs it. So the more recruiters in the UAE or Saudi or wherever in the GCC that you are connected to, LinkedIn will log this. The more of the recruiters' posts that you comment on, that you like, that you share, that you engage with, LinkedIn will, whether it be us, whether it be Hayes, whether it be Michael Page, whoever it might be, again, LinkedIn will log this. All of this data will then be fed back to LinkedIn Recruiter, which what I mentioned previously was referred to as the hidden job market. This is when recruiters will start reaching out to you and contacting you. As long as your LinkedIn profile is set up properly and you're putting in relevant activity, you will be popping up in their searches when they're looking for profiles like yours, and they will contact you directly. So the engagement isn't wasted just because you don't get a response. Sometimes it's actually the act of engaging with them that will increase your chances of landing a job. That said, if you're messaging recruiters with AI or copy and pasted messages, the chances of them getting back to you is near enough zero. Most people, when they reach out to recruiters, they will send a message that is beyond low quality. They will essentially have a copy and pasted message that will say something to the tune of, hi, I'm so-and-so, I do this, I've got 20 years of experience, I'm looking for this, I want this, and I want that, and I'm doing this. They do not care. They are not going to respond to you. This is just a junk message sales pitch. You need to message them and you need to reach out to them with their interests and focus on them, their job, what they're targeting, what they're trying to do. This is the kind of stuff you should be focusing on and messaging them about, because that is what's going to get them to respond to you, right? I don't mean offering them a job or something like that. I mean speaking to them like a human being, thinking, okay, there's a recruiter at Hayes. They've got 3 jobs listed. 2 of them align with what I do. What can I offer this person? Right? I'm not saying offer them money or something like that, but what can I offer this person? Right? Could it be just a thank you for something, a post that they've done? Could it be, what can you offer them? What value, or even if it's so minute, what value can you offer them that is different from what all of these other people are messaging them? If you do that, the chances of them then get back to you are so much higher. One thing you could do is say, hey, look, I got a message from one of my friends that said that they spoke to you before and they said that you were absolutely amazing. And then you just go into it, right? That's going to get their attention, right? Stuff like this. Let's see what we've got here. Right. So let's see. We've got a couple messages on TikTok as well. So how do you recommend that someone makes their LinkedIn more visible and better to get headhunted? So as I mentioned, there's two elements to this. The first element is how you set your profile up. Now, setting your profile up means completing your profile. It means making sure that everything is high quality, i.e., the photo, the banner, all of this kind of stuff. Making sure that every single section is complete, all of the mandatory sections, not filling it with junk, making sure that every single part of your LinkedIn profile essentially earns its place. If it's in there and it doesn't need to be in there, take it out and replace it with something that needs to be in there. You need to be able to ask yourself, what is a recruiter going to look for when they search for a profile like mine? When they go onto LinkedIn Recruiter and they search for a profile like mine, what are they going to type in? What key skills are they going to look for? What certs are they going to look for? What other companies that potentially work for are they going to look for? All of these kinds of things should dictate how you set up your profile, how you write your profile, because how you write your profile plugs in with LinkedIn Recruiter, and that's what leads to you getting headhunted. So that's the first element. The second element is your activity. LinkedIn doesn't want to push inactive accounts to recruiters, because if recruiters, they pay a lot of money for LinkedIn Recruiter, a lot, right? Tens of thousands of dollars for LinkedIn Recruiter. It's not a cheap platform. If they're messaging, if they're messaging potential talent, people that they want to headhunt, and they're not responding, they're going to view this platform as like subpar, right? Because they're messaging people and it's all dormant profiles. If you're inactive on LinkedIn, the chances of you getting headhunted decrease drastically, even if you've got the perfect profile. You need to be active. You need to be commenting. You need to be liking. You need to be engaging. You need to be connecting. You need to be following the right companies. You need to be restricting yourself from the wrong activity. You need to be making sure that you're putting in enough activity that's going to feed LinkedIn's database so they can push it into LinkedIn Recruiter and they'll build an algorithm and find your profile. So it's the way you set up your profile and the type of activity that you are putting in. Let's see. Here we go. So good question. So fully agree with the AI advice you gave. My question is, can you use AI to improve your language or grammar on your CV to make your statement more professional or formal after you've written it yourself? Or is this also easily detected by recruiters that perhaps it was written by AI? I really like this question. This is an amazing question. Just to read this again, can you use AI to improve your language or grammar on your CV? And let's say on your outreach in any way, shape, or form, should you use it to make yourself sound more professional or formal after you've written it yourself, or will this be detected? Simple answer is yes, it will be detected. And even if it's not, it will make it worse. You do not need to sound like a robot. You are not writing a formal address to the king or the queen, right? You are writing granted, a professional document, but you are writing this just for someone just like you. You are not in a sort of subservient position, or you are not in an inferior position to the people that you're reaching out to here. Your CV does not need to be hyper, these sort of AI words like orchestrated, streamlined, or these spearheaded, championed, these strange words that like AI uses that humans just don't really use. They don't need to be in there. It's not going to help you. One thing that I always say, and this applies to your CV, this applies to your LinkedIn profile, this applies to your messages, it applies to everything. Just type how you talk. Granted, if English is maybe your second language and you're using it for a grammar check, like a spell check or a grammar check, or hold on, make sure that we don't disconnect here on TikTok. Nice. So yeah, if you're using it for a grammar check or a spell check, then fine. Yeah, absolutely. You should be spell checking, you should be grammar checking, but your words should be your own. Companies are not looking to hire a robot, nor are they looking to hire someone who's, frankly speaking, when you use AI, you make yourself incapable of, like, you make yourself, or you run the risk of companies presuming that you're incapable of like writing or like literacy and whatnot. Because like, why are you using AI? Just write it by hand. I know it might sound like old school, right? But you write it as well as you can, and write it how you type, how you talk, write it out, and that is good enough. You don't need AI to, hyper professionalize it or formalize it. You don't need that. It's gonna make it worse. It's gonna look like everyone else's. Use your words, how you speak, use the language that you use. Obviously, you don't want to be too casual, but like, just type how you talk. You don't need it to be formal. You don't need it to be, scaled up, and you don't need to do that. Just keep it natural. Be yourself. You'll be surprised that that's what most hiring teams are just looking for. Someone who can be themselves, someone who can read and write and talk without being prompted by AI. We're in a really transitional period at the moment where I've been speaking with our team. I've been speaking with our team a lot recently, and we are quite concerned with the way that the world is going, not just the job market, but with AI. It's almost like it is making people reliant on it. We receive dozens, if not hundreds, hundreds of emails every single day. Vast majority of them are written by AI now. We're getting people who have landed a job. They're thrilled, extremely excited, right? But they're telling us about landing a job with AI. So it's like you can't even feel the person's sort of what they're trying to say on the other end of the screen, because it's written by AI, and you can tell, and it just strips any emotional, any connection out of the message. And granted, when you put it through AI, you might not read it and you might not think, oh yeah, that looks like AI. But for someone who receives so many of these messages, it does. On the other end of the table, it makes it look like you're speaking with a robot. And we only see this getting worse, which means people who don't go down this route of just trying to automate everything and strip all human interaction out of the process and just press a button and land a job, people who are not trying to do that will be in high demand. They will be soaring past everyone. And what we're anticipating is, right now, the gap between good and bad is pretty vast, right? Good is up here. These are people who are landing jobs in a matter of weeks, or 1, 2, maybe 3 months. And then bad, or not bad as in a bad person, but bad as in running an ineffective job search. The bad search is sitting down here at 6, 12 months, right? It's extending so far. But I think it will get to the point where people who are not using AI and people who are able to run the search on their own will be up here. And then those who are trying to find the shortcuts will be down here, or not even on the chart. They're just getting nowhere with it, right? They're not going to land any interviews, and then the whole idea that these guys have referrals, these guys have wasta, these guys must know someone on the inside. But no, it's because they're just doing what you're not willing to do. That's why they're landing interviews. That's why they're landing the offers. That's why people want to speak to them. So be mindful of falling into this bracket, because it will not be good for those who are in it. And the gap is just going to keep on widening. The more accessible AI becomes, the more people are relying on ChatGPT. Soon people are going to be sending WhatsApp messages with AI. Soon people are going to be, all their LinkedIn messages are with AI. All posts are written with AI. You're going to have sessions like this, webinars, where the person speaking to you is AI, and everything is going to strip back to people wanting that human being, because we're human beings. We connect with other human beings. And that is what's missing. And the more the gap bridges, the more difficult it's going to get for those who are pushing down that part. Let's see. Finding another question here. Let's see. I'm just trying to making sure to find all of these questions that are sort of high quality and relevant to everyone who's in the chat. Yeah, so someone's mentioned here, yeah, that the automation systems are now more rife than ever. So they're obviously seeing the importance in what we're discussing as well. Someone said, what's this? You mentioned that AI generated messages can sometimes cause issues. From your perspective, what's the right balance between using AI to optimize a CV and keeping it authentic, especially for senior roles where credibility really matters? Look, there is no balance, right? There is no balance. You shouldn't be using AI to write your CV. You shouldn't be using it for messages. You shouldn't be using it to ask questions on here. You shouldn't be using AI for anything pertaining to the human element or the application element of your job search. You can use AI for research purposes, but you should not be using AI for anything else, as it will harm you a lot more than it will help you. Good question here. How will the open to work banner on LinkedIn affect my job search? On your recent post, I saw it was marked with a warning sign. So how will the LinkedIn open to work banner affect your job search? It will affect it negatively. The open to work banner positions you as someone who does not have options, someone who is relatively desperate. And as I always say, it's okay to be in a desperate situation. We've all been in a desperate situation at one point or another in our lives. We've all been down and we've all been up. But you don't want to position yourself as someone who is desperate, as you can imagine, desperation is not a trait that companies are looking out for when they are hiring. In fact, it is something that they are trained to avoid. So the last thing you want to do is make yourself appear or position yourself as someone who is desperate. Let's see what we got. So someone's mentioned here on their CV, I believe they're referring to their CV. Should we mention on the CV visa status, ready to relocate? And also, do we need a UAE phone number to apply for jobs in the UAE? So you should not have your visa status on your CV. The only exception to that, and even then it's a maybe, it's not something that you should definitively have, is if you have a golden visa, and you can list that in the summary. It should not have a section, as there is no section on most of these systems that will pass that from your CV. So as per the having the visa status on your CV, no, unless you have a golden visa, and then it's a maybe that it should be in the summary section. Also, do we need a UAE phone number to apply for jobs in the UAE? No, you do not. Your location must be set to the UAE, and same with Saudi. If you're applying in Saudi, your location must be set to where you're applying, or as long as it's a GCC country, it's fine, i.e. your location set to the UAE, but you're applying in Saudi, that's fine. But if your location's set to Paris and you're applying for a job in Dubai, you'll get automatically rejected. But if you're applying from Paris and you set your location as Dubai, but you have a phone number that is from France or from Paris, that is not a problem at all. It will not cause you to get automatically rejected the vast majority of the time. The location will cause you to get rejected. The phone number will not. Typically, there are some systems that will, but the vast majority won't. Let's see. I'm just having a read through, trying to find questions that are like, there are a fair few questions that are being asked, but they're all like, I'm a senior finance manager with X, Y, and Z. These are more so specific pertaining to the search for this specific role. And it is going to be a little bit difficult for everyone else who is not in that space to follow the question. So for all questions, please do make them related to the search and not related to your specific role, if that makes sense. Someone's mentioned here that, like, despite modifying or adjusting their CV, they're still not landing any leads. It could be because it's not been modified correctly, right? It could be because it's not done correctly. There's also something that is very important when it comes down to applying for jobs. I go against the grain with this quite a lot, and you would have probably heard the complete opposite of what I'm about to say. But you should not be creating multiple CVs and using different CVs for every job you're applying for. Having multiple CVs for different scenarios is one thing. That's one thing. But adjusting your CV to tailor it for a job description is the wrong way to go. The ATS can and often will reject you for this because they can see what you've done. The ATS is looking for someone who can do the job effectively. They're not looking for someone who is able to take that job description, pop it into ChatGPT, put their CV into ChatGPT, and then change it based on that. It's not what they're looking for. Anyone can do that. They're looking for someone who, looking at their CV, is a good person to interview. That's what they're looking for. So if you're changing your CV too frequently, this can be a very negative thing. How stable is the organizations in the UAE or KSA business outlook over the next 12 to 18 months? It is dependent on each organization. There are some organizations that are still receiving huge investment, whether it be from government or private. There are some things that are still looking extremely positive. But then there are some organizations that are concerned and who are perhaps at more risk. The next 12 to 18 months is hard to fully plan out. Do I see any huge concerns with companies like packing up shop in the GCC or the UAE and KSA? Not really. Not really. Will there be effects? Yes, of course. But everything has effects, right? AI, this will not affect companies as much as AI does. AI causes thousands of layoffs, right? That's what's going to affect companies, and even shifts in organizations in terms of the way that they're hiring, the types of resources that they're hiring. This causes huge rifts. But in terms of stability of organizations, I would suggest that everything should be relatively stable, considering nothing crazy occurs. I think with the situation right now, it does seem on the face of it that things are calming down a little bit, but it's also difficult to actually understand what is genuine and what is kind of just propaganda or what is inaccurate because of the sort of crazy statements that are coming out and stuff like that. It is difficult for you to fully assess what's actually going on. If we're taking the headlines out of it and tweets and we're just looking at what's actually being seen and from a professional standpoint and a business standpoint, things do look relatively stable. As long as things don't change drastically, then yeah, I do expect things to be relatively stable. I'm just working my way through again. Someone's asked here, I've obviously asked this, but it's like a backlogged question. Tailoring your CV for every application? Definitely not. They've said they've been applying for 20 months. I'm all for starting from scratch. You would know. Oh, you mean starting from scratch with the job? So someone said, I've been searching for 20 months and they're obviously not landed a job, but they're willing to start from scratch if they need to in terms of their position. You do not need to do that. You definitely do not. And you shouldn't be willing to either. The reason you're not landing interviews or a job after 20 months, unless you're in a industry that is unheard of or a space that is unheard of, this should certainly not be the case. This should not be the case. Something is going wrong with your search. Definitively, something's going wrong. It is not a case where you need to take a step back or you need to be willing to do anything crazy like that. Oftentimes as well, believe it or not, being willing to take a step backwards in terms of your career when you're applying for jobs can actually make it more difficult for you to land interviews, right? Because organizations aren't looking for someone who is, as I said before, like desperate or willing to kind of throw it all away just to get their foot in the door, because it can indicate a level of instability with the hire, again, which recruitment teams are trained to avoid. Again, someone said here, look, I tried to apply for junior positions and executive positions. I've got a managerial experience of over 5 years, but I've not received a call or an offer. The reason why is because you've been applying for junior positions and exec positions when you're a manager. You should be applying for manager positions. If you're applying for manager positions and you're not landing interviews, it's because you are doing something wrong with your applications. It is not because you need to start applying for exec roles or you need to start applying for junior roles. It's because you're doing something wrong with your applications. That is why. Let's see what we got here. So someone said, thanks for the live session. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you taking the time out. Some jobs on LinkedIn and other job platforms can be applied for by using the easy apply function or something similar. Is it better to use such function on the job portal platform or applying directly on the company's website? So the only platform that you should be using the easy apply function on is LinkedIn or the company portal if they have an option for that, but not on like third-party platforms. They're not effective at all. Especially for the types of roles that I imagine you're going for. If you're applying for very junior roles, then applying on like third-party platforms, like whatever third-party platform may be useful. But for anything that's above like 10,000 dirham a month, you definitely shouldn't be. You should be applying on LinkedIn and directly on the company portal. So easy apply does not necessarily plug into their ATS. So what you want to do is you want to apply on easy apply, but you should also apply on their company website. Do both. There's no harm. These are often two separate talent pools. So you're essentially getting 2 tickets instead of 1. So if you apply on LinkedIn, if they make that hire off of LinkedIn and they use that talent pool, you may be chosen or longlisted and then interviewed. Similarly, if they don't choose you there, they may choose you from their ATS when you apply directly on their portal. So you're giving yourself 2 chances at the role. You then, after you've applied on both, follow up immediately with anyone you believe may be able to push your profile. So you essentially want to take every single tool at your disposal. Is it advisable to get cover letters written by AI, or should we write it ourselves? And is there any tool to check your resume against a job description? I would imagine that the question was, or I can see that the question was asked prior to me clarifying before. So, yeah, you shouldn't be checking your CV against the job description. Cover letters are completely redundant. Cover letters should not be used in the GCC. Cover letters are outdated. They are no longer, sort of recognized as something that should be used. Don't get me wrong, you may go on to some ATSs and it will say upload your CV and upload your LinkedIn and upload a cover letter. If that cover letter is mandatory, don't bother writing one. Just put your CV in there. Just upload your CV twice. People don't read cover letters anymore. Cover letters are completely redundant, so don't use them. So should we use AI at all, or do we not use AI at all, or do we use it to some extent? Only use AI for research purposes. You should not be using it for any types of follow-ups or applications or anything like that. Does easy apply on LinkedIn actually work? Yes, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. Let's see. Is there flexibility in the compensation structure considering cost of living fluctuations? I've heard people are asked to join at low pay packages nowadays. Um, Most organizations, there are some that have very strict pay bandings, but a lot of organizations do not have very strict pay bandings. And the salary you receive is the salary that you are able to negotiate. Most people, I have realized, are often willing to accept the first offer that the company releases when that should not be the case. And a company would never release, unless they were an ineffective hiring team, they would never release the maximum that they could go on an offer as the first offer. They simply wouldn't, unless it was a very niche scenario, right? The vast majority of the time, a company should be releasing an offer that is lower than what they are able to give you, so they have room to escalate that and increase that. When you receive an offer, it's up to you to push this up, negotiate it, assess what are you worth and what do you need to do to live and do your job effectively. And that is what you should be pushing for. Before you apply to any job, you need to assess, what am I worth and what do I need? Then you can start applying. But you should not be applying for jobs at all until you have a range of the salary that you're looking for. So you need to have a range in mind. And another thing that's quite important is you should not be looking for a specific salary figure. You should be looking for a range always. So for example, let's say you're looking for, your ideal number is 50K, 50,000 dirham a month. You should be saying to the interviewer, look, I'm looking for 40 to 53, for example, 42 to 52,000 dirham a month. And if they ask you to justify it, you can. You say, well, this is what I'm interviewing at elsewhere. This is what I've seen on the market. This is my understanding of my value. But yeah, that's a good way to do it. Right. Nice. Good question here. Yeah, and as I mentioned as well, on the back of this question, schools have gone back today, or a lot of them have anyway, which indicates huge movement on the job market. So for anyone who's perhaps been applying over the last couple of weeks and not been landing interviews, it is very possible you will hear back from hiring teams today, because the activity that we're going to see is going to be large. This gentleman has asked, is education allowance for children offered by SMEs and startups? For anyone who's not familiar with what an SME is, it's a small or medium enterprise. So a relatively small company. Do they tend to offer education allowance? And for anyone who's looking for a job in the UAE from abroad, for anyone here, you'll be very familiar with this if you have children. But if you're applying for a job, for jobs in the GCC or the UAE or KSA from abroad and you have kids, it is very important that you keep schooling in mind, because it can be very costly. Like a good school in the UAE, for example, the lowest you'd be looking at would be about 4,000 to 5,000 AED per month for something decent. And it can go substantially higher than that, up to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 AED per month, which is a substantial amount of money, especially if you have multiple kids. Now, are smaller organizations offering an educational allowance? Some of them are. Some do, although it's not as common as it is with larger organizations. With SMEs and startups, what I find though with a lot of the people that we work with is that they are able to negotiate harder with SMEs and scale-ups and startups than they are with MNCs, because MNCs, an individual is often less impactful. You know, when a company's got 50,000 employees across the world, you aren't going to be as impactful as you would be with a company that has 40 people. So if you can demonstrate immediate value to them, they'll often be willing to either increase your package slightly to offset the cost, or offer some sort of educational allowance. So it is definitely still a thing. It's more of a thing. Education allowance is more of a thing with sort of like senior manager roles with larger companies. and it will often be anywhere between like 50 to 100% of the schooling fees covered for 1, 2, maybe 3 children. The more senior you are, of course, the more ability you'll have to negotiate this. But everything's negotiable most of the time anyway. Most things are negotiable. Uh, how do salaries compare in the UAE, say, versus the UK? Typically around about 0% of like a 0 to 20% increase. So if you're getting a job in the UAE, about a 0%, a 0 to 20% increase of what you'd be taking in the UK over here, subtract any tax. Like, so before tax, let's say you're earning 100K a year in the UK and you come over here to the UAE, you should also be earning about 100K a year, but obviously you won't be paying tax on that. So around about that. Sometimes you can get up to about 20% more. Sometimes you can double it, triple it, right? It really depends on you, but typically 0 to 20% of what you're earning currently increase. What's the best way to engage with recruiters from abroad? The best way is by engaging with their stuff, because that will then prompt them to engage with you. And bringing them to you is always better than you having to go to them, because it kind of puts you in a bit more of a high position as opposed to you contacting them. But nonetheless, you can definitely reach out to them, connect with them, engage with their content, and pop them a message every now and again. Yeah, what do you think about? There's some people. Someone said that there are tools online that say that they can create you an ATS resume. Um, yes and no. Like, the idea behind an ATS resume is that there are several systems that are used in the region, and if you're just creating it off of a template, unless there's very strong guidance and it's created for the region, it is going to be difficult for you to kind of confirm that this is actually, right, ATS compliant, right? How long should your professional summary be on your CV? Typically, you want like 5 or 6 lines, maybe a little bit more for your professional summary. Your professional summary should be a singular paragraph, essentially telling the recruiter or the interviewer why you are worth interviewing for this position. Why are you worth being interviewed? It doesn't need to be a life story. It just needs to be a very brief snapshot of you, your career, your achievements. It doesn't need to be a big, long palaver. Is being physically present in Dubai advantageous compared to applying from outside of the UAE? So if you're abroad, are you at a disadvantage? Another question has just come in asking if they should move to Saudi and search for a job over there as opposed to applying from abroad. That come in on TikTok. But ultimately, it is safer. And my advice, my genuine advice, is to apply from abroad. Do not waste the money on coming here, trying to sustain yourself here and applying locally. Go to Saudi as well. Applying from abroad and landing opportunities from abroad is possible. The only scenario, or the main scenario that comes to mind where I would advise otherwise, is if you are targeting very junior positions. If you are very early stages in your career, it may be more advantageous for you to be here, or it will be more advantageous for you to be here. And that's because when you're early in your career, you don't have much to offer. You don't have much to offer, unfortunately. So being here can help a little bit. That said, if you're an experienced professional, especially if you're someone who's relatively senior, for you to have to come over here, like, it's not necessary. Will it give you some sort of advantage? Maybe, but it also put you at a disadvantage because you're going to be losing loads of money sitting in a hotel room, going down to a cafe trying to apply. You're not going to be walking into EMBD, banging on the door and saying, right, job please. Not how it works. You're just going to be doing the exact same thing you'd be doing from your home country, but sitting in a hotel over here. Most interviews are conducted online. Most interviews are conducted virtually. Most offers will be released whilst you are abroad. It really isn't necessary. You are better off applying from your home country, because the advantage that it will give you being here could be offset in other ways, and it could be a net negative, believe it or not. So a really good question here. I am trying to target the UAE market with my LinkedIn contents. Most of my engagement and impressions come from Asia, Europe, and America. What strategy would you recommend to better reach and attract the right audience in the UAE? So this might be quite surprising to hear me say, but posting and creating content on LinkedIn often will not help you land a job. And it can actually harm or make it more difficult for you to land a job. The reason why is because you may position yourself as someone who's looking for clients or customers, as opposed to someone who's actually looking for a job. So you want to be very careful about posting content, because it may actually present you as someone who might be quite a risky hire. And as I mentioned, companies avoid certain things, and risk is one of them. Companies are very risk averse. Hiring teams are very risk averse. So if companies view you as a potential risk, they will not interview you. They won't proceed with your profile. So I'm not sure what type of content you're posting, but for anyone who wants to post content with the hope of getting a job, like with the intention of getting a job from it, my advice would be avoid that and comment and engage with existing posts instead. So for example, all the companies you want to work at, engage with their stuff. People from the companies you want to work at, engage with their stuff. Connect with them and be active with them. And then disconnect with people who are not in the regions that you're targeting. For example, if you're applying in Dubai, but you're someone who's from Italy, for example, you need to disconnect with anyone who's not extremely relevant to you now from Italy, because most of your connections will be Italian or from Italy. So you need to make sure your profile is regionally sort of confound, so to speak. I'm going to take one or two more questions. I know there are so many, but yeah, I'll take a couple more because we are at the end of time. Someone's asked here again, like, is it advisable we take a leap of faith when moving to Dubai? Definitely not. Physically approach, so they can physically approach recruiters. If you physically approach recruiters, like walk into their office and stuff like that, they are not going to take it very well. Most of them will send you away and just say there's no one here, like just apply online or something like that. They're not gonna, it would be counterintuitive for them to sit down and spend that time. So that's not going to help. Would it be possible to give a small job search process or a plan day by day? I'll work on something like that, but it is tricky to provide because everyone's going to be a little bit different. I can provide something general and I'll work on getting something created for that. But yeah, it's everyone's going to have a different nuance and whatnot, but depending on how they're applying. So let's see. What's the best way to have a headhunter actually respond to your messages on mails and LinkedIn? Message them with human messages. Put a human touch into your messages. Make them feel like they're speaking to a human, not a robot that's trying to sell them a profile. I'm going to take one more question here. One more question. This one. How genuine are job listings? Most jobs have been filled before. Wait, most often a job which has been filled. Yeah. So someone's saying, how genuine are jobs that are being listed, and have the jobs that are listed already been filled, but they're just listing them anyway? Now, most positions that are listed, or not most, and that might not be fair to say, but a lot of positions that are listed on certain platforms are not legitimate, And a lot of companies actually list fake jobs as well. Even the largest companies that you would never expect this from list fake jobs, jobs that don't exist, jobs that haven't been approved yet, or jobs that have already been hired for. They may list them out of just, that's the process that we have. They may list them for more malicious reasons, in the sense of they may list them for marketing purposes. They may list them to pretend that they're growing. They may list them for other reasons, but there are a large quantity of fake jobs that are listed in the GCC and all across the world. That said, I would advise not worrying about this too much, because worrying about it is going to take you longer than it would just applying for it and moving on. One way that you can identify a job being legitimate is by looking at the job description and assessing, is this really comprehensive? Are they actually looking for someone, or is this just something random put together by ChatGPT? I know I said that this was the last question, but there was another question that I'd love to answer just here. Your LinkedIn posts often state, and for Instagram, you'll also see this, and TikTok, YouTube, your LinkedIn posts often state, your job search should take no longer than 2 to 4 weeks. So your job search should take 2 to 4 weeks is the phrase, not no longer, but your job search should take 2 to 4 weeks. However, this is often debunked by others. To provide reassurance and refute this, do you have any stats supporting your claim, i.e. job seekers you've steered through the process that have secured roles within this time frame? Yes, absolutely. So we do indeed. You can look at the stories I've posted on LinkedIn. You can look at our Instagram account with people who have managed to do this. You can look on the testimonial section of our website. You can look at my recommendations on LinkedIn, where there are things that mention people that have done this successfully. However, what I do say is that your job search should take 2 to 4 weeks. I don't say it should take no longer than 2 to 4 weeks. Many a time, a job search will take longer than 2 to 4 weeks. And the idea behind me saying your job search should take 2 to 4 weeks originated from the concept that if you are fired in the GCC, or you lose your role, or you're made redundant, or something to this tune, you need to secure something urgently, right? You need to secure a position urgently. Now, it is possible for you to secure a role within a very short time frame if you are doing everything effectively. If you're not spending this 2 to 4 week time frame, figuring out what works, testing your CV, doing this, doing that. If you're doing this, this isn't going to lead to you landing a job in 2 to 4 weeks. If you are already positioned properly and you are ready to apply and you know exactly what you should be doing, within 2 to 4 weeks, enough activity would be laid down that an interview or enough interviews that could lead to an offer should be there. Of course, if you then go and mess up these interviews or you don't convert them into offers, it's not going to take 2 to 4 weeks. The idea should be that it is possible to do it within a short time frame. It's not that you should be aiming or you should be expecting to land a job within 4 weeks. In fact, it is more prudent that you give yourself 1, 2, maybe 3 months to secure something, because that is a safer timeline to aim for as opposed to 2 to 4 weeks. But if you're running an effective search, you should start landing interviews near enough immediately. It shouldn't be the case where you're running an effective search and 3 weeks have gone by without a single interview. If that is the case, you are likely doing something wrong. Interviews should be coming in immediately. So look, I don't think anyone's debunked the 2 to 4 week thing, because it doesn't really make sense to debunk. But the idea behind landing a job in a short time frame, yes, it's possible. Is it ideal? No, probably going to need a little bit longer, especially if you're not running an effective search from the jump. But look, everyone's going to take a little bit. Everyone's going to have different time frames, right? And I think holding yourself to a very strict timeline when you're looking for a job isn't the best idea anyway, because you want to give yourself as much room to reject offers that perhaps aren't right for you, unless you're in a position where your visa is going to expire, your tenancy, you're going to have issues with that, and you're going to potentially need to leave the country, in which case there might be worth making some making some adjustments to what you're looking for. But nonetheless, I really appreciate all of you taking the time to join me today. Thank you all for taking 90 minutes out of your day. I appreciate your time is all extremely valuable. So thank you for putting the time aside to join me and to ask your questions. For anyone who I didn't get a chance to answer your question, I do apologize. You are more than welcome to pop me a message on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on TikTok, and I'll do my best to get back to you there and answer your question. If you have any questions, as I say, pop me a message and I'll always be happy to help. Again, appreciate you joining. You will be able to catch this session for anyone who missed the earlier portion, or for anyone who's going to be watching this there on after. You'll be able to watch this on YouTube. So yeah, appreciate you joining, guys, and thank you very much. All the best.